Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. My name is Rusty Gaylord. I am the host, and I'm happy that you are here. For those of you who are joining live, we love to have this be an interactive conversation. So please put your comments, your questions, your reactions into the chat, and we'll bring you into the conversation. I'm really happy to have today with me Mick Spiers. Mick is amazing. So he just is venturing off on a new business after many years as in the urban mobility area. And his new business is about leadership. And we're going to talk about how he got to there. But, that's a pretty significant change in direction from actually somewhat similar to my experience of working many years in one industry, in one area, and then shifting direction and going in a new one. So I look forward to having that conversation with Mick. And, I'll say this, but I think Mick was inspired by this sad statistic that only 16% of people in the world love what they do and like their boss. And there's just a great opportunity to improve that. So I am super happy to have Mick with us today. So welcome, Mick Spiers.
Hey, Rusty, it's such a great pleasure to be with you today and your audience. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Well, hey, let's jump into something that was one of those forks in the road, right? One of those first moments that you kind of thought about doing something different in your life. And you've described it to me, but going to someone's retirement party, someone you've worked with, a paramount person in the industry, right? One of these legends who got up and gave his retirement speech and you found that he was talking about you. So tell us about that moment and what that was like and what you took from that.
Yeah, Rusty, I still think about that to this day and the emotion that welled up inside me at the time. The guy in question, and he doesn't fully know this story, and I think he might be going to watch today and watch this back, but his name's Bob Hamilton. And Bob is an absolute legend in the urban mobility space, particularly around automated fare collection. He made us rethink what it means to deliver that service into a platform as a service business with his business partner, Gary Yamamura. And as it came through a series of acquisitions, etc., he ended up working in my team. And I was at his retirement party, which was an emotional experience in itself because legend of the industry kind of moving on. And I gave a nice speech about Bob, of course, and thanked him for everything that he had done for Cubic and also for our industry. And then in return, he spent part of his speech talking about me. And there was one statement in particular that I'm going to call being the first domino that knocked off a domino effect that has changed my life. And he said that in 40 years of working, it took him 40 years to find the best leader that he'd ever had. And I was just completely taken aback. He shouldn't have been talking about me at his retirement speech. It should have been about him and the legacy that he was leaving, the amazing legacy that he was leaving on our industry. And he chose to spend some of that time talking about me. I talk about a domino effect. So the next thing that happened is after his retirement speech, I went around talking to other people also in the industry that I've known for years. I'd been in the industry for 15 years, Bob for, decades. I said, well, you're not going to believe what Bob Hamilton said. And then every single one of them, like these really good friends of mine that I've worked for years, every single one said, well, duh, Mick, that's what you do. And I then realized it was this huge moment of reflection and realization. I'd always thought that the reason why I'd had a successful career in the urban mobility space is because I was good at what I did. I had deep domain knowledge. I really understood what it meant to make a city move, to give people a great user experience when they're trying to navigate around their city, etc. But it turns out the reason why I was successful is that I was able to inspire people into meaningful action around painting a vision of what a city could look like, about having clarity of that vision and the mission and what we need to do to make cities a better experience, and to then treat people like they matter so that they would in turn matter themselves and do great things. So it was this amazing turning point in my career that I will always be eternally grateful to Bob for that one statement that he made that knocked on to all of these subsequent events that have happened in my life in this last year.
That's an amazing story. I love that. And one of the things that strikes me about this, Mick, is your willingness to hear it. I think a lot of people, when they get compliments, kind of brush it off like, oh, yeah, that's not a big deal. Or if it doesn't feel like it doesn't align with the way they see themselves, they're more inclined to push it away or not take it in. But you took it in a way that helped you to shift your whole perspective on yourself, right? Away from I'm successful because of my expertise to I'm successful because I'm empowering and leading people to deliver great work. Like that's a big shift of your own perception, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And what then happens is a huge amounts of realizations of the things that
Mm.
have made up my history, including those people that helped me to be the success that I was. And I did have a wonderful career, and I'm sure people are wondering why I'm stepping away at probably nowhere near the peak. I could have kept on going and continue to have a wonderful career in that industry. And I'm choosing to leave a very well-paying job, a company that I actually really love, a industry that I love, a passion that I was pursuing, to go and pursue a different passion. So you can imagine that there's been a lot of realizations that have happened in that last year.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that when people contemplate change, oftentimes we get pushed into a change because something is difficult. There's some
Mm,
discomfort or something that's not working in life, and so we get pushed into making a change. But what you're describing is a different experience, which is being pulled into a change because of something that you want to do, and you're
yeah.
leaving something that you like. You're leaving something you feel some passionate about, that you're good at. You've got expertise, all of that, and yet what you're moving into is important enough to you that you're willing to make that transition, to step away. I'm
Mm,
curious, how did you make that decision? How did you come to terms with that? Because you liked what
mm.
you were doing.
Yeah, this is going to be a slightly longer part of the story, but I think it's important, Rusty. I still believe in the vision that we're trying to create in the urban mobility space. And if anyone wants to have a chat to me about urban mobility, I'll still take that chat, because I still love Cubic. I love the industry. I love what we're trying to achieve there. But
Mhm.
I feel like I'm being drawn now by a bigger purpose and a bigger draw. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as the interview goes on. So what then happened after this, I started doing a lot of research. And this is when I started having bigger moments of realizations that
Mm.
from what Bob had kicked off. So you mentioned that research from ATD, finding that only 16% of people in the world love their job and like their boss.
Mhm.
16%. So imagine this. I've been spending the previous 15 years of my life trying to de-stress the way people commute to and from their jobs, only to find out that the stressful part was the 1/3 of their life that they're spending in the workspace,
Yeah.
where they're not inspired, where they're not engaged, they don't find they have purpose and meaning, etc. And then I started
Mm.
doing other research and realizing that some of the things that have been taught to me over years by wonderful people like Melinda Muth and Ross Nichol and David Morley, all these people that have had a wonderful influence, Joy Pitts, my very first executive coach, all of these people had a wonderful influence on how I lead. And I thought what I was doing was just common practice. So
Mm.
everyone knows how to do these things. It's common knowledge, to discover that it's not. And people's experiences don't match that. And that was what led me to go, you know what, I need to do something about it. And that was the side project. That kicked off what was the side project called the Leadership Project, starting with a podcast. I wanted
Mm.
to have a podcast that challenged people's thinkings about what it meant to be a leader in a modern world, and started to invite wonderful guests to come in and challenge our thinking and get the conversation going. So
Yeah.
that was the immediate knock on.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you just wrapped that up. You said you want people to get the conversation going. And I heard that in your journey as well, right? It sounds like Bob Hamilton got the conversation going for you, right? With one
Yes.
sentence. But it
Yeah,
was a
that's it.
conversation, right? Like
Yeah.
I think oftentimes it takes no time at all for that first idea to come in, but it takes some because it just drops in, right? In this case, it's a line you heard somebody deliver in a speech about you. And it opened up a new possibility, but it also requires a willingness to walk down that path. And you did that. You did some investigation, you did some research, you explored it, you ultimately started a podcast. So, what I hear in that is so familiar to me, which is, people say, well, I can't just quit my job and go start this thing. Well, you don't just quit your job and go start this thing, right? There's a bunch of steps that you take along that way. It's a journey, it's a conversation, and you're making progress. So what was it like? Was there any challenge for you because I know it was just in the last number of weeks that you actually left your job in the industry and went to spend full time on the leadership project. So when it came time for that final decision, was that hard? Was that easy? What was that like for you to actually walk away from 15 years invested in this career in those final days?
That's a great question, Rusty. And elements of it were dead easy. It was so obvious by the end that this is what I had to do because of that calling. But there's also an emotional side of it of saying goodbye to a lot of friends. And it's not really goodbye because I'm going to stay in contact with them for the rest of my life. But turning my back on something that I'd loved, and it's the people that you'll miss. The purpose, of course, but the people I miss for sure, and I will be staying in contact with them. So there was an emotional side of it, but the calling was relatively obvious, and that calling built up throughout the year of the podcast and the things that happened to me last year with getting coaching certification. I think we should have a chat about that. Writing a book that was transformative in its own way. The amazing guests and every one of the guests that came on the show, and I'd love to chat about that as well with your permission. There are so many guests that changed my thinking along the way.
Yeah. Well, I think that fantastic. So let's dive into that. And I just want to say one thing, which is that, I say you don't discover your passion, you build your passion. And I hear some of that in what you're saying, which is you did build passion in this area as you invested yourself in it, as you took action and got deeper into it. So let's talk a little bit about the podcast and how that led into the book, and then ultimately the business that you've built.
Yeah, great. All right, so I'll start with the some of the amazing guests that we've had. So Lisa Partridge, she was episode 10, and I'm going to say that was a big moment. And funnily enough, it was a little bit adjacent to what we were talking about. She's an expert in communication. She trains organizations like Singapore Airlines, their cabin crew, on how to communicate with people. And she's a wonderful expert in her field. But when I got into her personal story, she shared something with me that has stuck with me since, which was people want to feel like they matter. That was one statement in the podcast. And that becomes a building block in what becomes my vision and mission going forward. I'll go to guys like Don Campbell. This was the amazing surprise of season 1. Don Campbell is a 71-year-old sculptor. And most people's first reactions would be to say, what would someone from the artistic world know about leadership? And I was interviewing to challenge our thinking about creativity and how you unlock creativity in your team. And what becomes of the interview is he turns out to be a deep scholar in the work of Otto Scharmer around deep listening, about listening with an open mind, an open heart, and an open will. And that moment changed the way I do my podcast interviews from that moment onwards. I just throw away the script. And all I do is deeply listen to my guest and build on what the guest tells me. So that was episode 14. And every episode after that in my view, is richer because of Don Campbell. And I keep going. Zach Mercurio. And what I'm doing along here, by the way, is I'm practicing what each of the guests does. I trial and error everything that they tell us. So Don Campbell teaches me about deep listening. So I try it and it's transformative for me. We have Zach Mercurio, the author of The Invisible Leader, come on the show to talk about purpose and meaning. And he gives our audience this exercise, a 7-day challenge to find our purpose and meaning. I put it into practice. It changes my life. We bring Lee Prosenjak on to talk about how you engage with people on Zoom even, etc., and how to get to the real essence of what's going on with them. Changes the way I see the world. Bring Corey Patrick White on, who's an expert in algorithmic bias. Changes my perspective of the world. So I feel like my audience is richer for all of these interviews, but I feel like I'm personally richer from all of these interviews. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is. It does. And there's something important in there, which is, knowledge by itself doesn't change anything. You have to apply it. And it's the experience of applying the ideas. It's when you gain that experience, that's when things start to shift. And if you continue to apply it and you continue to gain more and more experience, at some point you get to the place of mastery, where it becomes a skill that's in your tool set that you don't have to think much about.
Yeah.
But you have to go through that journey from gaining the knowledge to gaining the experience to developing the mastery. And it's a process, but just hearing something doesn't shift your whole experience. So I love the fact that you not only are interviewing people and getting more knowledge out there, but then you are applying it and you're gaining the experience.
Yeah. Really good, Rusty.
So tell us how you're translating that experience, those skills, all of these things that you're learning into what you're doing now. How are you bringing this work out into the world?
Yeah, good. All right. So one more step along the way that I'd like to share, and then that crescendos to that question quite well. As I got more into this, I realized that there was something deeper to it. So I also discovered the Coach Masters Academy, a wonderful organization by Ben Coe in Singapore. Just amazing, transformative experience. Wonderful faculty with people like Evan Spargo and Joe Lanigan and Sarah Devereaux and Jacques Smith. All of these people have changed the way I approach coaching, moving away from more of a mentor role into a coaching mentality. They're affiliated with the International Coaching Federation, and I've become a coach along the way. So then what happens is you come back to that decision point about how did I make this decision? Now what happens, whether I'm in a podcast interview, whether I'm giving someone coaching or I'm talking about leadership, I get in to what is called a flow state, where time seems to be immaterial. I'm completely present and mindful, completely in the moment, listening to someone deeply, listening to someone without judgment, and guiding them on a process of transformation. And when you watch your clients make those transformative shifts, your heart just fills with this joy that is a ever renewing, sustainable joy that you just can't ignore. So that is the ultimate thing that leads me to this is a bigger purpose than what I was finding in the mobility world. Now what happens is, well, what do I do with that, which is your question. So we've now launched the Leadership Project as a business, not just as a movement. And we offer a series of cohort-based courses, which start on March 7. We offer one-on-one and group coaching services to help people with transformative shifts in the way that they see their leadership and to take their leadership to the next level. And we deliver business-to-business workshops for any businesses out there that are looking to build and forge high-performance teams, or in some cases, some level of remediation where you've had a team that has been high-performing and over time have formed some cracks, in the heat of battle, whatever you want to call it. Cracks start to form in relationships, and we have some specific workshops that help you to reform a team, not just form a team, but reform a team and get them back to their former glory. So what we do now, courses, coaching, and workshops.
Yeah, fantastic. So for someone who's listening to this, I'm wondering if you have a little tidbit that you could share. Now, I know it's always hard to offer a tool to apply in a short amount of time without having a whole context. But for somebody who's listening to this and finds this appealing, motivating, and I just want to comment on one thing, which you talked about, flow and feeling joyful. And I hope for anyone listening to this, I hope you can feel the sense of joy and flow. Because I know, Mick, that's one of the things I appreciate when I talk to you is I feel that. And I can very much feel in the moment in this conversation. And so I appreciate that about you as well. So I'm wondering, is there something that you would offer to someone just as a little tool that they can apply to improve their leadership?
That is a super challenging question because I have so many, Rusty, as you can imagine. So I'll try and be brief. The first thing I'll say is that leadership is not about you, and yet it's all about you. Now, what do I mean by that? As a leader, your focus needs to be on your team, the health and welfare, the psychological safety of your team. Your job is to give them an environment where they can flourish, help them to identify their superpowers, help them to build their strengths and build their gifts and bring those gifts to light. So your job is to bring the best out of your team and to give them an environment where they can excel. So it's not about you, and yet it's all about you. So in what you do, you're always looking to make sure that people have purpose and meaning in what they do, where they feel that their voice can be heard and their opinions valued, and where every day they individually and collectively feel like they matter. And by creating that environment, they will achieve far more things than what you ever could. And there's a famous African proverb. This is probably a good one to leave it on. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And if you can embrace this concept of doing that, you will be a successful leader. Treat other people the way they want to be treated. Treat them like they matter, and that, you know what, they will matter. They'll do amazing things for you and with you.
That is an awesome place to wrap it up. Mick, I'm going to put your website here up on the screen, but beyond that, is there a good place for people to connect with you if they want to reach out and learn more about what you do and get your book and all of that?
Yeah, great. So if you go to mickspiers.com, that's a good starting place. There you can download your free self-reflection journal. Self-reflection is something that I learnt from Joy Pitts, my first executive coach. I've been practicing that for 10 years and it really changed my life as well. So there's a free download there for you. You can get details there about the upcoming book, which will be launched at the end of March, called You're a Leader, Now What? And it's about those people that go through that tricky transition from being an individual contributor to being a leader and go through that roller coaster of emotions that happens at that point. You can see details in there about our courses and our coaching and our offerings. Also quite prolific on LinkedIn. I love a good engagement. I love a good conversation. All right. So get these messages out there so that people are talking about leadership and what we need to do to address the leadership crisis that we see in the world. And we also have a Facebook community group, once again, all about that conversation. So the Leadership Project Facebook community group, if you want to engage with other people that share the same passion for improving their own personal leadership and improving the way leadership is delivered in the world, please come and join us in that Facebook community group. We'd love to have a conversation with you. And of course, there's the podcast. The Leadership Project podcast releases every week with a new thought-provoking guest. There's a gem. There's at least one gem every week, and I'd be amiss to not mention your episode, Rusty, which was absolutely amazing. And we've had such a great response to the interview that you conducted with us at the Leadership Project podcast.
Well, thank you, Mick. I appreciate you joining in this conversation. I know for those of you who don't know, Mick is not located in California, and it's 4:30 in the morning his time. So thank you so much for being here, for being alert and sharing some of your journey of the forks in the road, but also some great tidbits and wisdom about leadership and impact and purpose, and yeah, just a lot of good stuff. So thank you so much, Mick.
It was my great pleasure, Rusty, and having a conversation with you at any time is wonderful. Sharing it with other people so that they can also get something from it. Well, what more could I ask for? Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.